Good afternoon. Yulia Navalnaya, honestly, thank you very, very much for accepting this conversation, and I'm not just being polite. Thank you so much. On February 16, 2024, I was in Munich at the Munich Security Conference, and the news of the death of your husband came as a very deep shock to everybody at the conference, and I guess some of you were there too, so you will remember that day, and you were there. And a few hours later, you took the stage and you spoke, and you explained that the Putin regime was responsible for the death of Alexei Navalny. Now, since then, you have come out recently to announce that tests conducted by 2 laboratories on biological samples obtained from your husband proved that he was poisoned. And I would like to ask you, why do you think he was killed on that day? Was there a timing issue? Why was this date chosen? What is your explanation for that?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me, and thank you for your kind words, first of all, about me and Alexei, and about your support. Of course, it was very difficult, the most difficult day in my life, and we promised that we'll do everything to understand what happened. We are working, and our investigating team, which is very strong, is working on this. Of course, it's not the same like it was in 2020, when we had a lot of results and we were able to save Alexei from this poisoning. Now it happened in prison. That's why, of course, everything was much more. Everything is going much more complicated. That's why they sentenced him in prison. That's why they moved him to such far from Moscow prison. Now we understand it probably much better. And speaking about this video which I published last week, it was mostly about we wanted to show people that we are continuing to investigate. Despite it's very difficult, as I said, I wanted to show how he lived in prison. Mm-hmm. I wanted to show how was the last Alexei's day in prison, and I think it's very important to show people in what conditions he was, that he had nothing, really nothing in prison, and it's sometimes it's very difficult to understand, even in free world, even here in Europe, that people are just spending years in a small cell, really small cell. They are not allowed to lie during the day on the bed. They are not allowed to do anything. There is just one book which he had. There were no possibilities to write all the day, just half an hour, and he managed to do even these conditions a lot. And you probably, a lot of you saw some kind of videos from the court where he was like, he all the time was funny, supported all people around, and that's the person whom my husband was. And I think it meant a lot for the supporters. So that's why I published this video. That's why I wanted to show and to tell about this day. I wanted to show pictures which we got, and it wasn't easy. I know that there are some results from laboratories, and I don't think that it's time to speak about countries, and I very hope that they will come by themselves. That video was a kind of call to action to them, and I think that all the world needs to know the truth. I think all the world needs to know that I think you all know here that Vladimir Putin is war crime, that he is a kind of mafia boss, but still to show people all around the world every day that he is he goes further and further and further, and he will never stop, and we must be united against him in this fight. It's very important.
Mm-hmm. Talking about prison, Vladimir Karamurza, who was released, says that there are more than 3,000 political prisoners in Russia, which is more than in the Brezhnev era. And yesterday, Mikhail Khodorkovsky said that this war was going to last for 10 years. Of course, nobody knows, but it's a possibility. So how do you express dissent today in Russia? How do you resist? I mean, we know, according to polls, that the majority of Russians support this war, but there's still a sizable minority which apparently doesn't. So how do you, how do you assess the state of the public opinion in Russia, if you can? And also, how can you tell us what is the way to express dissent, to resist to in such conditions? You know, if how do you have a voice if you don't want to go to jail? And how is the legacy of your husband's work? How can it continue? How can it be? How can you carry out this work? Many of your friends have gone to jail since you've left, yeah. And so how do you view this situation?
What a long, big questions.
Yeah.
This one question, a lot of questions. Let's start from political prisoners. And you're absolutely right. The amount of political prisoners in Russia is rising every day. And that's why it's almost, I don't think that we even could count the exact amount of these people. Because before, they were almost just political activists. So they were in kind of this, political activist community, and we knew about these people. But now there are a lot of people in prison just for saying the words or for the likes in social media. So they never were like a real political activists, and they are just in prison. And sometimes we even don't know if their relatives or their lawyers, and they mostly don't have lawyers, come to us, come to, people who are much more involved in these political processes. That's why I don't think that we even able to count the amount of these people. And for sure, the amount of these people is rising.
Including teenagers. Yeah.
Absolutely. Including teenagers, old people. It's Vladimir Putin. It's Putin's regime, absolutely like normal, standard dictatorship. They don't care about people's life. They don't care about anything like human. And I'm sure that the amount of these people will be rising because when you start once, dictator starts once, he will never stop. That's why inside Russia, of course, it's almost not possible to be vocal, to be loud against this regime, because people are just afraid. They understand that they could be in prison. And you say about majority which supports Putin. Actually, nobody knows how we can count these figures, how we can fund these figures. We can rely, if we rely on a kind of percentage in elections or percentage in government surveys, I don't think they are reliable, because Vladimir Putin, their regime, they are lying all the time. How can we rely on these results? And everybody, I hope everybody in this hall understands, when President got 85% in presidential elections, that's not true. Of course, it's not true. Probably some people, not some, probably even more than 50% support, but it's not, about 85%.
So, there is opposition, there is resistance in exile, right? Like what you are doing. Now, is there such a thing as, this is a shorter question, is there such a thing as the Russian opposition in exile? How can you act in exile?
I will tell you on example of our organization, Anti-Corruption Foundation, which was established more than 10 years by my husband. We were moved to live in exile in 2021 because we were called extremists, and our political organization is doing almost the same that we did inside Russia. We are very strong on YouTube. We have 3 YouTube channels, one of them 6 million and 2 of them each of 3 million, and we are doing just political content. It's so, not...
Yeah, talking about YouTube, so I understand that it's very difficult now to go to the social networks, so people use VPN. This hasn't affected your audience?
Well, it's affected on us, first of all, because, of course, being a Russian organization now, much more complicated to communicate with YouTube and so on. But still, yes, you're right, that just since the last year, they started to slow down YouTube, but it's still possible to get access. And, you know, people under dictatorship are studying very fast. So when they realized it's not possible to get the access to the programs, to the YouTube channels, which they usually watch, so they started just to use VPNs. And personal example, even, of course, my mom is now using VPN, and when I call to her, she's saying, like, let me switch to one VPN to another. It's how it works. Then more pressure, then more restrictions, then more people are trying to reach independent information, and probably it's a good sign.
We've touched this issue of exile, and your husband went back to Russia because he wanted to have a voice there, and he felt that he could only have a political role if he was there, and he didn't want to live in exile. Exile is an experience which, fortunately, in this part of Europe, we have not known for some time, but it's quite familiar to Russians, to Belarusians, people from Belarus or from other areas now of the post-Soviet bloc. Can you tell us how, I mean, is this something which is tough for you and for your friends? I mean, how do you adjust to this life in exile, and how do you think you can still be effective? You've talked about these YouTube channels, but I mean, how do you try to regroup in exile? We know that there are many difficulties in getting a unified position among Russian exiles. How is this a challenge for you in your work?
In a lot of questions. In one question, we started from living in exile and came to Russian opposition. First of all, living in exile, of course, very hard for everyone. It doesn't matter what nationality you have, starting from the documents, continuing just to start the new life. And it's actually a very good question if to go to another direction. It's a very good question that people are forced to live in exile now. But for me personally, like Russian politician, it's very important to force them and to ask them and to persuade them one moment to come back one day. That's why I am doing a forum, and we discuss the current situation and future of Russia, and I try to work a lot with young generation, with students who are now in exile and who they are very keen about how to help and about all these issues around Russia, and I hope to persuade them and to keep the contact with them, because to persuade them to come back one day, because it's very important. These people in exile, they are very educated. They were able to find the strengths and power to start the new life abroad. They find the strengths. That's why, of course, they one day, building the new democratic Russia, they will be the right people to connect with. And it's very important, I think, to work with them, to support them, to, you know, have round tables, to have such talks, and to be in contact.
Do you think you will go back to Russia one day?
Me? Mm-hmm. I'm sure. If I wouldn't be sure, I wouldn't be sitting here. It's really very personal thing for me. I never wanted to live in exile. I knew everything, and I support everything my husband did. And I think that, I don't think Russia is my country. Moscow is my city where I was born and where my children were born. And I'm absolutely sure that if I don't believe that one day I go back, there's no sense to be here, to participate in these conferences, to continue the fight, to bring the voice of silent Russians now on the world arena. So it's very important for me, and I'm doing all this to go by myself one day back and to help other people to go to their own country one day back. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there are other people who live not in their country. It's Ukrainians. Millions of Ukrainians are displaced, but we prefer to talk about them as refugees, because when the war ends, they will hopefully go back to their country, and Russia is in a different situation. You published an article in The Economist recently about, last week, I guess, yeah, about the West strategy or lack of strategy towards Russia. And I would like to ask you a couple of things about this. You said that the West was naive at the beginning when Putin arrived, because and even earlier than that, because we thought that democracy would come easily to that part of the world and so on. Are we still being naive? That's one question. And second question, do we have a strategy? Does Europe have a strategy? Third question, does the United States have a strategy towards Russia, and do you understand it?
I don't want, to be the person to give a lot of advice and to blame anyone, but of course, in 2014, for example, all these sanctions against annexion of after annexion of Crimea were naive. West did nothing.
The West didn't react
at all.
Yeah.
That's at that point, Putin just realized that he can do whatever he wants. And even still now, I think that it was very good strategy to isolate him since the beginning of war. Putin wasn't invited to any conferences. People just stopped, and politicians just stopped talk with him. And I think that it worried him a lot to be isolated. And I think that people inside the country were exhausted of this situation. And now I can see this year, it looks like it's normalization. I would call it normalization of war, because war is continuing. But at one moment, I can see news that there is Russian delegation is participating in a kind of conference in Switzerland. President Trump is welcoming Putin in Alaska. And I understand there is the must that there should be negotiations, how to deal another way to stop the war. But from the other side, President Trump is absolutely is chosen the president of the United States on a normal elections. He's like real president, and I hope everyone here trusts to democratic elections in the United States. But Putin coming to elections in Russia, who is he? Nobody understands. He is called president, but he never participated in any real elections. He never participated in normal campaign before these elections. He never participated in any debates. He never allowed any politicians, like my husband was, very strong politician who opposed him to participate in these elections, and to welcome him and showing him that they are equal. I think that Putin is just enjoying the situation, that he is again on a world arena. His people and politicians are kind of welcoming them, and even not Putin, but some people from his team are welcoming in Europe. They are allowed to participate in some kind of international conference, really. After they were 3 years of war. Still, there are some thoughts that we can negotiate with these people like they are not war criminals, but they are normal politicians who represent Russia. But of course, they are not normal politicians. They don't represent Russia. They don't represent a lot of people inside Russia. They don't represent us. And it's very important to show Putin that you all understand that he is not one politician. Now he's in power, but that's how democracy should work. Should be other elections, and he will lose in these elections, but it's not his case. I'm speaking in general, but in his case, he is war crime. He is one of the, if not the most corrupt politician in the world, and he should spend the rest of his life in prison for all he did.
But so he's a war criminal indicted by the International Criminal Court, but yet the President of the United States, as you pointed out, invites him to talk. Now, when I was asking your opinion about whether the United States has a strategy towards Russia, General Kellogg this morning said, you have to talk to your adversaries. And this is something we hear more and more. Some European leaders did try to talk to Putin before the full-scale invasion, and it didn't lead anywhere, right? But again, this question arises, and as General Kellogg put it this morning, if you don't talk to your adversaries, you know, it's very difficult to try to find a solution. Do you see, how do you respond to this? I mean, we do talk, should we talk only to people like you and human rights organizations, and or are there people in this regime that
you probably need to talk with us more? But I think that the time when we discuss if we need to speak with Putin or not is finished. The main thing which we and you must do to put the maximum pressure on Putin. With other things, they could... No, I don't support any economic sanctions. I don't think they work against all the Russia, because I think that Putin is using these sanctions for propaganda reasons, coming to people and explaining them that all the world is against them and it's just unites Russian people and Putin. I think that they should be very strong, much stronger than now. The personal sanctions against Putin's inner circle, against there are still few sanctions. We know that that Putin and his inner circle are very corrupted. They are A lot of them are billionaires. They have a lot of assets, they have property abroad, and to use this property to seize this property, to do a lot of things, to raise personal sanctions, to remember about these people who are trying even to escape, but now, after the war is continuing for 3 years from this, it's important. This Putin who are helping Putin to keep economy, to keep military things, to keep everything. Now in 2025, these people are war criminals as well. And I like this example. Just remember that we have not just a president, we also have prime minister. And it's very important, as you know, here in Europe position. Nobody remembers about Mr. Mishustin. And he says nothing about war. He says nothing, he appears not very often everywhere on TV and so on. But he is the main person. He is the main person, and of course it's very important. He is just one example. There are a lot of such people like ministers and so on who are helping, and of course Putin's friends, oligarchs and so on, who are helping to keep the economy, to keep a lot of things around Putin going on. And of course, all these people are responsible and must not be forgotten.
We have very little time, just a few seconds, so I will ask you a last question, a simple one. When you go back to Russia, will you run for election?
Oh, come on, we'll see when I go to Russia, then we'll see what political situation is, but I want to change a lot in Russia. I absolutely sure that Russia should be a normal democratic country, and I'll do my best to bring Russia to European community to make a lot of democratic changes, and it's very important to do it.
Yulia Navalnaya, thank you very, very much. Thank you.